Let me show you what I came up that would be something suitable for Project 2. Just want you to come up with your own thing that demonstrates all the stuff that's happening here, which I'll go through one by one. So it's hard to tell, but it's very subtle, but there is a gradient changing in the background. And then notice that these are somewhat complex objects, but they are all created in Edge. Nothing was created in Photoshop or Illustrator here. And then you probably noticed that the movements, other than that one, all of these, they all take place over a second, but they have some special features known as easing built into them. So let's go ahead and we'll start up a new document from scratch here so that you can start to learn some of these. Okay, so stage size 800 by 535, and then animate a gradient. So gradients are really just like using color. So if I make a rectangle here and I go into the color properties here, I can set a color, but I can also click here and bring up a gradient. I can have a linear gradient, and you can see here's the starting and the finishing color. If I want to edit the finishing color, I just simply click on it, select a new color. If I want to edit the starting color or the opposite color, I simply click on it and select a different color. I can change the degrees right here. So try that, watching your screen what's happening. So that is a linear gradient, meaning we start with one color, finish with a different color depending on how the angle's set. I can also have a radial gradient. It starts out with this color in the center and radiates out to this color. I can change the X and Y coordinates of that center. So if I want the color to still be radial, but it's radiating from here out this way, well, we just can't see what's going on the right. And we can animate these states. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to click this button right here, and that just lets me be able to grab this gradient. It just sets it in as a swatch, much like we had with the colors before. So I'm going to hit return just to make that go away. So here's my rectangle, and now in the last project we had animated with this button off right here, just the auto transition. This time we're going to add a helpful feature here, which is the auto keyframe. You just have to be very careful, because whenever you make a change on anything, it's going to think that you want to animate it, and it's going to make a keyframe for that. So if it's happening and you don't want, just Command Z, turn this off, do what you want to do. I think as I start showing you, this will make more sense. So I'm going to take that rectangle, and I am going to click the keyframe right here to insert one, and then I'll move over, say 2 seconds later, and then I'm going to go into my gradient, and I'm going to change that X position over to the other side of the stage. Now notice that I didn't click to add a keyframe the second time. As soon as I hit enter, it automatically inserted the keyframe and the transition. So that's one of the nice things about this, is if that's what you want, great. If you were simply trying to make a static state where you had this over here and immediately had this over here, that would be a situation where you would want to turn that feature off. You can animate the gradient on whatever you want for your project. I just want to make this clear. I won't keep saying this, but you are just taking the techniques that I'm showing you here and applying it to your own video that's 8 to 20 seconds long. So if you want to animate a rectangle, you want to animate a sphere, whatever, go for it. In my particular example, I animated the stage. So all I did was click here, bring up the gradient for the stage property, and then came up with, here, I'll just come up with something and show you. My playhead over here at the beginning, came up with a gradient. And notice you can add color sections to your gradient. So if you didn't want it, just in my case, to go from pure white to a darker gray color, I could add something in the middle here with the more saturated color. So now it's going from white to this color, and then from that color to the darker color. So I'll just leave it like that for now, and go ahead, hit return. Now I'll move my playhead several seconds over, and I'll just have the background just subtly change in here for the first 4 seconds. So now I could hit this keyframe button here, but since I have this on, it's really not necessary. It just senses whenever I make a change. So I'm just gonna slowly look like the sun's rising maybe. Hit return. The animation is already in there, and if I play it, you can see it's just a very subtle transition. So the next requirement on this project is to animate at least one grouped object. So where animating a grouped object comes in handy is we still want to animate as much as we can using just edge, but if we had something that was a little more complex, like in the last video I created a sword, so I would need the piece that sets off the handle. So I could go up here, grab the rectangle tool, put that. Now as of right now I just have 2 separate rectangles. So to group, well actually before we group, let me just show you what I did to make the blade look a little bit better on this one. I just selected this, went down to the corners, and I'm going to change it to 4 so that I can independently change the corner. So I just put a little bit of roundness on here. Now I can also, if I want to make sure that this is perfectly aligned, sometimes the little guides like right there is telling me, but I also have alignment tools in this program, not quite as advanced as other ones, but I can go up here to modify, align, and click horizontal center, and that would do this. I can also, if I'm just trying to vertically center it here, which I was, let me put it off center for a second, select both pieces, shift key on the other, modify, align, and vertically center, and there. So now if I were to try to animate this right now, it just wouldn't work. So what I do is I select both pieces. I can either right click on it and select group elements in a div, or from up here in the menu I can simply select modify group elements. Now what you notice happens here is these elements, this is the first rectangle I drew, the second, and then now we have a group. I'll rename these to make a little more obvious what's happened. So there's your blade, there's the handle piece, but now everything is inside of this group. It's not real obvious what's happening down here, but up here you get the indenting, which makes it a little bit friendlier, and you can close that up here in the elements. So you can now think of this group as any other object that you would draw in here. It's going to animate together. So let me just, I'm going to spin this around with the just make that my new starting point, and so I'm going to animate this now. So here, let's make our starting point. We'll just go 1 second to 2 seconds. So there's a starting point. I can click here on the X and Y coordinates to make them start out, then move this over here. Whoops, actually, want to move my playhead first. Now move that. You'll see that we get not only the auto transition, but the auto insertion of the keyframes. And there's our animation. If we want to put a rotation in that as well, we can go ahead and click here on to add the keyframe for the rotation, and then come over here and either do it manually like that or enter in a number here. And so now when we play this, we have that. So So what if we want to make it look like a little more realistic, like maybe it's coming at an arc? So let's go ahead, highlight all these animation sequences here, get rid of them. So here is how you animate along a path. What you do is you come up here to where it says transition mode, and with this selected, and you click motion path. Then you have to get your keyframe inserted for the first keyframe. So now that I have motion path selected, X and Y are grouped together. Notice there's only one keyframe location there. Now, let's say we want to make that 2 seconds later. I'll move this over to here, and I get this little line that shows up. As soon as I move my mouse over here, this looks a little bit like the pen tool in many of Adobe's other programs, and I can click and I can drag to move the line up. And then if I need to get really accurate, I can come over here and click on these handles that kind of work like a magnet pulling this arc over. And just keep in mind that this arc that we're drawing here is the path that this object's going to follow. So if I scrub the playhead, you can see it now follows along that path. So then if we want to add, let's go ahead and click on the add keyframe for the rotate, and we'll come over here, and now I'm just going to drag this so that it looks like it's following that rotation some. And then if we drag the playhead, we can see it does that. But if we want it to actually turn around one time when it does this, then we'll take this all the way around one time. And now if we drag the playhead, we get something a little more dramatic. Now let's talk about symbols. One important use of a symbol is, let's say we have an object that we want to animate several times in different ways, and it's complex like this. Rather than just creating a new rectangle and grouping it every time, or even, probably better choice would be to copy and paste this, but we can make a symbol that will then go inside of our library, and it's there for multiple use. We just simply drag instances out. So let me create a brand new symbol just to show you another trick or two that we can use with these tools here. So I'm going to take the rectangle, and this time I'm going to make a blade that looks like it's coming more to a point on it. So I'm going to zoom in and change the color of this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this to 8. And what I'm first going to do is round this corner off, which will be a little bit tough to see here. Zoom in a little bit more. Okay, so I'm going to, using these two, they kind of work with each other. I'm going to try to make this as flat as possible so that it looks like 1/2 of a knife. That's probably good enough. And then what I can do is just remember these numbers, 177 and 17, and also the width and the height of that first object that I made. Zoom out a little bit here and show you that sometimes you don't even have to remember all of that. But let's focus on this first here. 272 by 16. I will just simply click right here, drag out another rectangle, and notice that the tools are helping me. So there's my 272. And as soon as I get 16, that little thing on the left comes up to tell me that it's the exact same size. So that's pretty friendly. Now let's deal with these 177 and 17. So again, I'll click on 8 to get independent control of these. So it should be this front one that becomes 17 and this bottom one that becomes 177. Again, those numbers just came from experimentation. And then I'm going to put them together so that it looks like one solid object. So there we go. And then I'll